There are events so brutally life-shattering that even the most imaginative crime writer wouldn't dare to make them up. The story I'm about to tell you, so unbelievable and insane undoubtedly, falls into that category. No ordinary mysterious death in a remote mansion, no priceless jewel gone missing. No, this story is about the indomitable human will and a fate that mocks every known law of probability. Then, years later, something happened that shattered every remaining notion of chance. A walk, harmless, mundane, as ordinary as breathing. Frank strolled down a road he had walked 1,000 times before. Nothing unusual seemed to lurk among the shadows. Until a bus driver, another one, not the one from before, lost control. The vehicle skidded, dragging two pedestrians into death's cold embrace. Frank? He fell backward into a pit, an accident, a hole in the earth, unmarked, unseen. He heard the crunch of metal and bone, smelled the diesel mingled with blood. Two dead lay above, while he below experienced the usual, a few bruises, but otherwise, of course, untouched. 5 encounters with death already. 5 times he had danced closely with that dark rider who stalks all mortals, and each encounter was more grotesque than the one before. Could it still be coincidence? Or was something else at work here? I began to believe in things beyond reason, began to suspect that Frank was not merely a man, but something else, something that defied the very laws of mortality. But then came the moment that surpassed them all, the final touch, the last drop that made the chalice of the unimaginable overflow like poison from a cracked goblet. Frank told it to me with a voice trembling like shattered porcelain. Even years later, the horror echoed between his words. He was driving again, this time across a bridge high above a yawning abyss. Built from concrete, it stood ancient and forgotten, like a mausoleum from a time no longer counted. He merely wanted to cross it, nothing more than that one simple task. Suddenly, smoke rose like vapor from hell. The steering wheel froze, rigid like a dead man's arm. The brakes offered no reply to his desperate grasping. The car veered, broke through the railing like a cannonball, and plunged into the gaping depth. "I jumped," said Frank, and his voice almost vanished within the silence. The memory left him mute, like a grave sealed by time. He remained quiet for a long time, so long that I began to think he would never speak again. Then, finally, like a ghost rising from its grave, I jumped through the window into the void. I flew through the air like a fallen angel, landed among the branches of a tree that stood there like a sentry of the abyss. I hung there like a miserable creature, trapped between sky and soil. His eyes stared into the distance, as if he still dangled there. And I saw my car explode down below, watched the flames lick the sky like famished tongues. I asked no more, could not ask. I was stunned, utterly overwhelmed by this brutal cascade of death-bound incidents. Incidents that would have ended the lives of many under normal circumstances. But not Frank. Frank continued to stare death in the face. And death, once again, was the first to blink. The evening ended as usual. Frank rose, paid silently for his coffee, vanished into the shadows like a spirit robbed of rest. But one evening he remained seated and said with a voice heavy as burial soil, "You don't yet know the last one, the maddest of them all." If Frank deemed something even madder than all he had already endured, then I dared not imagine what could possibly be worse, what could be even more unbelievable, more impossible. What came next, indeed, cast all else into shadow. The evening was heavy, heavy as old iron wrapped in mist. Frank sat across from me, his hands resting motionless upon the table, as if they no longer belonged to him, but were relics of a bygone age. Smoke from his cigarette curled like a serpent around his fingers. "There's something that was never in the newspapers," he said finally. His voice was hoarse and brittle, like frozen gravel. Something I'll tell you only because you were the one who never laughed at me. I did not know whether that was an honor I wished to carry. Sometimes ignorance is a blessing not to be surrendered lightly. He took a sip, slowly, almost solemnly. Then he began to tell me of the seventh accident, again, a car crash, that changed everything. It wasn't just the accident, in which he once more left the road to embrace a tree and destroy his car. No, it was what happened afterward. Frank wandered through the woods, dazed, until he came upon a small cabin. It stood as if forgotten by time and untouched by maps. An old man sat before it, smoking a pipe. He spoke no word. Frank asked for help. The man simply nodded and opened the door. And still, Frank understood. This man knew something. Something that hung above Frank like a curse. He slept there, uneasily, dreaming of faces and fire. When he awoke, the cabin was empty. Only a note remained. No one nearly dies 7 times without reason. Frank returned to his car. It was no longer damaged or dented. It was intact. The police spoke of a mistake, of no report, no tree. And Frank remained silent, as he always did. But that was not the end. Only the prelude to something far greater. For Frank suddenly won the lottery, a $1 million prize he had never even hoped for. I never bought tickets on principle, he said, only on that one day. He became wealthy, moved house, bought things he didn't need. But he could no longer sleep, woke up screaming. Called me. He's back. Death. This time he won't let go. I found him slumped in his chair, pale, bloodless. He had done the math. 7 times death had come. Then the money, as if it were an exchange. A pause. I found them all, he said. The others, the ones who survived. You know what happened to them? They vanish, without a trace, all of them. The light flickered. Went out for exactly 7 seconds. When it came back on, the television was lit, static, a distorted figure. He's watching me, whispered Frank. I took him to a hospital. But the next day, his bed was empty. Transferred, they said. No reason given, no trace. His house, cleared out, empty. Only a photograph remained done I had never seen. On its back. It's not over, not by far. I did some digging. Found 3 more people in Europe. All had survived multiple accidents. All had vanished. All had suddenly won money. All had spoken of nightmares. Months later, I received a letter without sender. A music sheet, singed at the edges. One line. He didn't take me. I went on my own. I could have let it go. But Frank had given me too much. Not money, not things, but questions. Questions that cut deeper than any blade. I kept searching. Found a church register from a remote village. An entry. Child of the woman with no name, given to the monastery. There, in that monastery, in an old sacristy, I found a diary. The final entry. He survived, again. He's not like us, he's not from here. Then came the sound. Faint, like electricity. From my old piano, long silent. There lay a tape, Frank's favorite piece, but altered. It sounded as if the song were dying. At the 7th repetition, a string snapped. Fensolence. That night, I dreamed of a tunnel, dark and endless. Frank sat between train cars, alone, with a suitcase. He looked at me, did not smile. But his eyes said, "Now you know." The train departed. Without rails, without destination. Frank vanished. I knew. He was not dead. He had simply moved on, perhaps to a realm between realms where rules do not apply. Where death does not come, because he already dwells there. 1 year later, I saw him again, or thought I did, a station. An old man at the far end of the platform. Not Frank, but similar. Between his fingers, a lottery ticket. "I had an accident," he said. "My car flipped 3 times, and today this." "What is your name?" I asked. "Michael," he replied. I said nothing, shook his hand, and walked away, because I knew it had begun again. Frank had made room for the next. What defies death is not rewarded. It is sent onward. Sometimes, between 3 and 4 in the morning, I think back to the man who escaped death 7 times. Death does not bargain with money or remorse. It bargains with existence. Sometimes it lets one go to bind another. Frank was freed, but the price was not his. Perhaps it is mine. Truth, or just fiction. You'll find out when we meet again for the next unbelievable story. If this story fascinated you, give me a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Truth, or just fiction.